Well, hello, and thanks everyone for joining us for Optimizing Online Engagement with MetroQuest. We're so pleased that so many people have registered for this webinar, especially right after the holidays. We're getting into the holiday spirit here at MetroQuest. We've got these wonderful cookies. Thank you very much, Heather, for these cookies. Aren't they so cute? We're thrilled to have so many people online to learn more about MetroQuest. I'm going to jump right in. I am Dave Biggs, Chief Engagement Officer here at MetroQuest, and I'm pleased to be your host today and show you around. We're going to talk a little bit about online engagement options that are out there and really lead into why MetroQuest is the way it is, and then give you quite a bit of a demo of MetroQuest to show you around and help you understand how it is optimized for great results for online engagement. And then we're going to go into a Q&A. So anytime during this webinar, if you think of any questions, you'll notice in the Go-To Webinar panel, you'll see a little question box. So ask away. We'll get to as many of those questions as we can at the end of the webinar. So fire away, and we'll address as many of those questions as possible. I have the privilege of being an advisor to many different organizations on best practices, and as a part of that, looking across a very wide variety of case studies, particularly case studies that focus on online engagement. And as a result of also our work with MetroQuest, working with so many customers that are subscribers to the MetroQuest platform, we have this vantage point that really gives us a privileged position of looking across how agencies across the country are using online engagement and what is contributing towards the best success possible. As part of the research that we do, we're always trying to figure out what are agencies trying to accomplish with respect to online engagement. And really 4 areas continue to come up. The first goal that is expressed most often is the desire to increase the participation. The average participation at a public meeting is now below 10 people. 9 people is the average number of participants at a public meeting. So agencies across the country are looking for anything that they can do to increase the engagement, not only in terms of numbers, but also a broader demographic representation across the spectrum. So those 2 are really about the quantity of engagement. And then there's a couple about the quality of engagement. They want to make sure that they're informing people and educating people about sometimes the complex issues that are being dealt with in the planning process. And lastly, it's important that agencies are able to really clearly quantify what they're hearing from people, because often they're asked to summarize the impressions of the public on particular planning topics. And so the need to quantify what they're hearing in order for it to be summarized is very critical. And if these things are done well, and we look at this sweet spot right in the middle here where all of these things are done well, the end result is improved decision making, because the agency is much better aligned with the public priorities across all demographics, but also generating much more support for plans going forward. So that's really the goals that we've heard over and over again, now from over 250 interviews that we've performed with agencies using online engagement. So I'm going to start with just an overview of how the various options out there compare based on our look at how agencies are using online engagement. Now, the first one is social media. Oftentimes, agencies are going to social media to try to increase participation. And social media has a capability, really, depending on how many followers you have, of having a large number of participants and even a broad demographic, increasingly broader demographic online. Unfortunately, the drawback of social media is it's very difficult to quantify what you're hearing from people, and it's not very educational. People are predominantly just learning from each other and contributing to discussions with each other. Then you've got online forums. Online forums is kind of like your own social network where the number of participants tends to be rather low, and unfortunately it's very difficult to quantify the input that you're gathering from online forums, because it tends to be one discussion after another, and oftentimes it can kind of look like the bottom of a magazine article online, where people are just kind of having arguments with each other, and not very productive and certainly not informative. Then you've got the opportunity to build your own website, or to use a platform that allows you to develop a microsite. And the benefit here is it can be very educational and informative. Unfortunately, the number of participants can tend to be quite low. And again, without any way of quantifying the input, it's difficult to kind of summarize what people have, what input people have provided. A lot of people have turned to traditional surveys or multiple choice surveys, and the participation can be better on these sort of surveys. Unfortunately, it's not very educational or informative, and the results can be kind of easily misinterpreted. But it is a great way to have quantifiable input, because you can ask, if you don't ask too many open-ended questions, you can summarize the input. Now, what we have done in the development of MetroQuest is really tried to optimize across all 4 of these goals. And let me explain how we've done that with MetroQuest. The first goal that I mentioned is increasing participation. So one thing that we've really focused on is to make sure that MetroQuest is very useful across multiple different channels, from kiosks and community centers to online on desktop computers, tablets, and as well as, of course, increasingly mobile users. We find that there's a huge uptake in terms of mobile participation online, and so you want your site to be really delightful to be used on mobile. The next point is it's private. This is a great metric that is important to people, because online forums, social media tends to be a very public place, and people can be intimidated about weighing in. But creating a private experience for people to allow them to have their input without fear of biasing or ridicule is very important for a lot of people that are out there. One thing that we've really taken to consideration is how short attention span people have, particularly people that are not particularly motivated to participate. And we've found that about 5 minutes is the perfect amount of time to ask people for. If you ask for much more than that, the participation drops off considerably. So 5 minutes is about the right amount of time to ask people for to maximize participation. And closely related to that, broadening the demographics. There's a variety of things that you can do that we found to be very effective in terms of broadening your reach to people that don't normally participate in planning projects. The first one is the importance of making it really visual, and closely related to visual is fun. So these things combine to make an enjoyable experience that doesn't feel like homework, and people are much more likely to share it with their friends and have the engagement spread virally, as opposed to needing to get people one at a time. The third aspect, inform and educate. Now, I've got a lot to say about this, and I'll spend most of my time in the demonstration talking about how MetroQuest is designed to be fun and educational at the same time. So one of the things that we've done with MetroQuest is we've managed to gamify the experience. And so, as opposed to asking for a multiple choice response, we've created little mini games that people play that are quick and a little bit fun to do, and educational at the same time. So playing budgeting games, or looking at different scenarios and seeing how they perform, educating people about alternatives, or addressing budgeting questions. So turning things into a little bit of an interactive game can be fun, but also educational. So the input that you're getting back can be trusted to be reliable. Number 4 is quantifying input. It's really important that the questions that you're asking people will generate results that can be summarized in terms of a graph or very quickly, so that decision makers can understand from different demographics point of view what the priorities are. So we've spent a lot of time at MetroQuest making sure that the results coming out of it can be imported directly into your planning documents and into your PowerPoint presentations to decision makers. So a lot of people ask us, when is the right time to launch a survey like MetroQuest? And we've got really 3 different stages in the planning process that we found to be very effective to go out to the public for responses. At the beginning of a project, you're likely wanting to get people involved in expressing what their priorities are for a particular project or what issues they have about a particular area. So you might get them to put comments on a map or rank priorities. These kind of activities are very popular early on, so people feel like there's openness and we want to understand what the priority issues are. Once you get into the project a little bit, maybe you've got some discrete options for people to consider. For example, having them select which projects they might want to promote, or to rate different scenarios that they might want to consider. And then towards the end of the planning process, you might want to get more specific with people, invite people to provide input on images, or identify their priorities within a range of different options that are being considered for that kind of implementation phase of the planning process. So really, across the spectrum, there are these times where it's logical to go out and get community input. MetroQuest has really been designed with a lot of input from agencies over the years, and so we have focused on a variety of both transportation and land use projects, and really with an iterative conversation figured out what planners' needs are in terms of communicating the trade-offs and options associated with planning processes, but also collecting informed input back. So across transportation projects, we've done a lot of work on mobility plans, long-range transportation plans, corridor plans, and then in the land use, there's all kinds of different stages and scopes, from land use plans in a neighborhood to a building site, all the way up to a comprehensive plan. So I'm going to show you a few examples in the demonstration period shortly. Really, with MetroQuest, building a site and then launching it to the public and then analyzing the results occurs in 3 discrete stages. So I'm going to turn it over to a demonstration at this point and show you a variety of examples. So in the kind of the setup stage, the beginning of the project, we're looking at your dashboard. So when you have a subscription to MetroQuest, you'll have this dashboard, and for any particular project that you want to launch a public engagement exercise for, you'll be able to choose amongst a variety of different screen types. So here's a variety of screen types to choose from, and my task here is to imagine what people are going to be wanting to do, what are we going to want to get people to weigh in on, and which of these screen type templates are we going to want to choose in order to get the right input and communicate the right issues. So among each of these, we've got a variety of instructions and some keys to success, and so when to use it and so forth. So we've got a lot of instruction here about which options you might pick for which types of projects, and plenty of examples to show you. Once you've picked your screen types, then it becomes very, very simple to populate each of those screens with content that is going to reflect the choices that are in your area. So for example, here on the welcome screen, so we've got this particular project about a corridor plan. If I want to, for example, change this image, then I can just drag in another image here and say, I'd like to swap out this image. So there we go. I'd like to change this text. And so it's very easy to get in there and populate it with your own content that's gonna motivate people to participate and help them understand the issues. Once you've got your site all together, let me show you what it looks like. So here's and I've got, you'll see in the tabs across the top, I've got a number of different examples open that I want to show you a variety of different sites. I've picked these sites based on some of the best performing sites that we've seen at MetroQuest. The average participation, just so you know, the average participation across these sites is over 5,000 participants per site. So massive amounts of participation, and so I'm excited to show you these examples. Here's one for the DOT in Arizona, and I love this one because it gets right into what are your issues that you want to promote in terms of priorities. This is the right question to start with. And then we go into a very interesting exercise where we show the existing budget and how it's allocated and some discretionary funds that can be allocated to different areas. And what you quickly start to understand as a participant is, wow, it's kind of hard to spread this budget around appropriately. All of a sudden, you're educating people about the issues that are really being dealt with, and you're collecting their input against those trade-offs. Here, they've done a great job of helping people understand specifically the trade-off choices that a DOT makes every day. Is it more important to preserve and maintain the existing roadways or to expand to new roadways? There's a choice that we have to make, smooth roads or more roads. All of a sudden, the public gets a much more close appreciation for the challenges that are being faced, and they get to have their say on it. And then usually the last screen asks a bunch of questions about demographics. It's interesting that most people will actually provide this information because at this point in the process, they're engaged, they want to hear the results first. So you ask a bunch of demographic questions so you really know in fine grain who you're hearing from and maybe who you're missing so you can focus your promotional efforts to fill in some of those gaps. This one here I like because at a vastly different scale, we've gone from the state scale down to a single project. This is a multi-purpose recreation center, and they did a great job of giving people some examples. For example, what do you want this to look like? How do you want the common areas designed? And people weigh in on these very quickly. How do you want the recreational facilities to be focused? And so I thought that was a great way of getting people engaged in some specific questions. Now that the process is almost ready to close, they've got some real examples of how the community center needs to be designed. At the metropolitan scale, I love this example where you're in Nashville being asked to rank your priorities for what's important to you with respect to the new transit service that they're developing. And then we go over to the scenario screen where we have an option to look at different scenarios that are being proposed of how the transit system could be improved. And you see how they perform based on your own top priorities. So this one is a kind of a mixed bag. This one is even worse on some of my top priorities. This one does fairly well on many of my top priorities, but there is a trade-off there. And so when I click that I like this scenario, I'm doing so being aware that there's this trade-off that's associated with this. So it's really important to bake education right into the experience so the input that you're getting can be trusted, that people are aware that there's pros and cons to each of these options. As we all know in the planning process, every choice comes with both pros and cons, and it's important to get that across in a screen that takes about a few minutes to perform. Different ways of doing scenarios for different scales. So this one is looking at a campus development plan and looking at different scenarios for the campus development. I loved this transportation plan for Lee County. What they're doing is they're giving people specific development options. They're costing them out. This interchange for $49 million. Do I want to spend my money on that? Do I want to develop this SR 82, widen it? You give people a real idea on the costs associated with these things, the budget associated with them, and get their input at the same time. So once again, dovetailing a fun experience with an educational experience and collecting people's input on priorities. This one here is a bridge replacement project. Just to give you an idea, only 46,000 people in this entire community, and the images were rated over 30,000 times. So massive amount of involvement that they were able to get on a bridge replacement project where they addressed issues like, is it more important to move people or to move cars? Where would you put yourself on that spectrum? So I really liked that one. This last one did a couple of things really well. This map marker screen really invites people to weigh in on, for example, where is a new bus stop needed, or a new safety improvements needed, all kinds of issues where you're just inviting the public to identify where their concerns are with respect to this area. This is an active transportation plan, and in order to fund the plan, they had this fun little game using our budgeting tool, which allows people to figure out how they're going to balance this budget. And they realize, you know what, some of these methods of fundraising are more powerful than others, and there I've balanced the budget using these tools. So a great way to get people to understand the strengths and weaknesses of different types of tools and to collect their input on which ones they would favor. Now, just a few notes on kind of what this looks like when it comes out the other end. So you'll have a dashboard which you can monitor the results. You can monitor the results over the course of the project and see which of your promotional efforts are most effective. So you can beef up some of those that are more effective. And you can also monitor the demographics. So you can see who you're engaging, who you're missing, so you can target those underrepresented populations as well as you can. And so here we're watching this one closely because this one is just about to pop above 15,000 participants in Fairfax County in Virginia. And so you look at the percentage of people that have participated on mobile. 8,100 people participated on mobile, and 6,400 people on a desktop computer or a tablet. So you can see how important mobile is when looking at these results. Here, if we look at the results, so this particular project engaged 9,300 people, sorry. So this one, you can of course look at the results in a variety of ways, and we wanted to design these things so you could cut and paste right into your report, or of course download the data yourself in Excel and do your own analysis. What I really like is the ability here to dive into the demographics and to see exactly who you're hearing from. This one is a perfect example about how we're hearing from a broad cross-section demographically of the population. So look at this participation right across the spectrum, almost mirroring the actual population demographics. So very, very important to be able to monitor that and then beef up your promotional programs a little bit more in areas to target some of those underrepresented populations. So that was my quick run through of the kind of setup, the engage phase, and the analyze phase. And I wanted to really spend a little bit of time showing you those examples to demonstrate how we at MetroQuest have really tried to focus on these top engagement goals that we keep hearing from agencies about increasing the participation, broadening the demographics, but also gathering informed and educated input that can be quantified. And it really, all of these areas are critical for agencies in order for the results of the public engagement to stand the scrutiny that is often put through by decision makers. We love to celebrate success of our clients, and so here's some of the examples that we've looked at and some of their results. Results like this are always very heartwarming for me because even in small communities, you can get massive results, or on projects that are very limited in scope. For example, a corridor plan, to get 5,000 people involved in a corridor plan review is very, very powerful because you get a much broader representation of the community and their needs. And I love to see this from our clients, seeing the graphics that MetroQuest produces used right in the reports, and seeing the amount of data that they're able to deliver to decision makers about the public's impressions and their support for the plan going forward. So one of the things that I do at conferences all the time is I try to meet as many clients as possible, and I usually ask them a bunch of questions. And really the most important question that I want to ask is, what difference did it make to have this kind of massive participation and input for their planning process? And I always pay a lot of attention to their answers. So one answer that we get quite a bit is, we just had way more participation than we were expecting. And I love it when people say they got much more than they were expecting on their very first survey. So that helps me understand that right out of the gate, people can be quite successful. So over 7,000 responses from a broad demographic in their first survey. They went on in this particular project to engage over 25,000 people. And I loved what they did to communicate back to the community about what they heard. They produced these wonderful infographics that really help reinforce a culture of engagement in the community, to reward people for participating by saying, here's what we heard and here's what we're doing about it. It's a really great closing the loop kind of activity to do. Another thing that we hear commonly is something like, it gave courage to the elected officials. And that really speaks to me, because elected officials would like to approve dramatic and forward-thinking plans in their community, but they need to know that the community is behind them. So having this data to be able to support those kind of courageous decision makings, I think, is really powerful. And we hear that quite a bit. One of the things that, in fact, one of our clients in Nashville did is they had a very generous budget for public engagement, and they used just about every tool out there. And they actually sat down at the end of the process and they evaluated what the cost per participant was on a variety of different outreach techniques, from events where you can imagine public meetings, relatively high cost per participant, right down to the bottom where MetroQuest scored about $3 per participant. So dramatic difference there. What we're trying to do is we're trying to have massive amounts of participation for the lowest cost per participant, because we know that agencies are suffering from decreasing budgets, but still calls for more and more participation. So it's really important to keep in mind that MetroQuest is delivered based on an annual subscription where you can use it on any projects with no additional cost. And so the more you use it, the cost per participant really drops dramatically. And there's no additional cost for that. I wanted to, before I open it up to you, now get your questions ready. Before I open it up to you, I wanted to let you know about an upcoming webinar that I'm really excited about. I don't know how many of you know Dave Meslin, but in the public engagement world, he's a bit of a rock star. He produced a TED Talk, which has been viewed over 1.7 million times. And it is on the topic of public apathy and public engagement. And he is going to be joining us on December 12th to talk about what you can do to address public apathy and revitalize engagement. So hopefully you'll be interested in that webinar. I know I'm really looking forward to it myself. I'm going to pop open a quick poll for you, because I would like to give you an opportunity to tell me what kind of additional information you would like. So here is a quick poll. So if you wouldn't mind coming back to your computers, if you're multitasking, and letting me know what kind of additional information you would like. So we've got a number of choices here. Would you like pricing information about MetroQuest? Would you like clarification on any of the capabilities or features that you might be looking for in an online engagement platform? Would you like to discuss what your particular goals are with respect to online engagement, and to discuss with us how we might meet them with MetroQuest? or possibly another tool if your goals are different from the ones that we've optimized around. Would you like a case study for how to create outstanding public engagement? Or would you like to be registered for the December 12th webinar? You can pick as many of these as you like. So any information that you would like, please weigh in now. I wanted to let you know that in the follow-up, I'll be sending you a paper that we've created about how to avoid some of the drawbacks associated with multiple choice surveys and how to optimize your surveys around the highest participation, but also getting the most quality input possible. So stay tuned for that in the follow-up. At this point, I'm going to take it to questions. So if you have got any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the question box. We've already got a few questions that have come in. Well, actually quite a few. Holy smokes. Okay, so I'm going to have my work cut out for me. So let me get to these questions. So how did the communities with high participation promote their surveys? There's a variety of promotional techniques that are really important. Now, one of the things that is most critical right off the bat is designing a survey to be short and fast and interactive. That's probably the most powerful thing that you can do to generate high participation. But then there's a variety of other strategies that we have a variety of guidebooks to help you with that. But it's really about combining promotional strategies with monitoring and targeting audiences. So one of the most powerful techniques that we've seen is going where people are. And so if people are, if you have an underrepresented demographic, to going to where there's an underrepresented demographic at, for example, a meeting, and maybe taking some iPads and putting up a table and helping people to get started as a great way to fill in some of those gaps. You're going to have large participation online already, but you might have gaps, and really that's the way to fill in those demographic gaps. So you shared many MetroQuest surveys with lots of participants. What do you attribute it to? Oh, okay, that's very similar to the last question. So again, visually compelling and interactive is important, but combined with promotional strategies, and that's usually on the client side of things, and we can give you some tips and tricks on what's most effective on the promotional side as well. Another question here, on the map screen, I saw lines on the map to guide the participants to key areas. So this person is asking, we already have KMZ files from our GIS software. Can we use these, or do we have to recreate them in MetroQuest? So the answer there is absolutely, you can upload your KMZ files and right into MetroQuest, so you can have those lines on the map and those options presented to the community. So here, you said that participants can use smartphones. Do they have to download an app first? That's a really great question. Absolutely not, because we know that that would kill participation very quickly. And so what we have is a responsive tool that senses the device that people are using and sends them to an appropriate version that's optimized for the screen that they're using it on. And we know that a small screen, it's important to get the information laid out in a way that really fits comfortably on that screen. So we sense that automatically and direct people to it without requiring an app. What is the typical percentage of smartphone participants for MetroQuest surveys? Well, the range is pretty significant, but generally speaking, we don't see much under 30% these days of smartphone users. And as you can see from the results of that example that I showed, sometimes the results are higher than 70%. So it's absolutely critical that whatever tool you use to engage the public is delightful to use on a smartphone. Not just workable so you can kind of pinch and zoom, but delightful right out of the bat. So with that, I want to thank you very much for participating. That's all the time we have. I wanted to respect your time and end quickly. I want to let people know, for those of you who are collecting AICP certification maintenance credits, there is the link there. No need to copy it down, because we will be including that in the follow-up email that we will send shortly. The follow-up email will also have a link to the recording for this session. So if there's any segment of the session that you wanted to go back to, or if you want to share it with a colleague, feel free to do that. As well, we will have a copy of the PowerPoint slides that I showed, so you can show those and share those as well. Again, if you've asked questions, we will get to as many of those as possible, as quickly as possible. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your schedule to learn more about MetroQuest, and I look forward to talking with you soon. Take care.